Like his main character, Peter Ash, Nick Petrie arrived on the thriller scene full of lethal skill. His crisp, evocative action scenes, richly drawn characters, and fresh plotting drove his debut, The Drifter, to several Best First Novel awards, including the International Thriller Writers Award. 4 more Peter Ash novels followed, each garnering critical acclaim and earning a rare level of respect among his peers, with Lee Child calling his Peter Ash the real deal, and David Baldacci calls him one of the most complex characters he's come across. Now, with his 6th Peter Ash novel, The Breaker, Petrie fashions a story filled with genuine mystery and a terrifying technology that will keep readers up at night long after they reach the end.
All right, well, I'm the host for today. Let's get right to it. The Breaker is your 6th novel featuring the exceptional character, Peter Ash. Can you give us the elevator pitch of the story and what it's all about for the folks at home?
You betcha. Peter Ash is a Marine Corps veteran having trouble adjusting to his life after his war. And as The Breaker begins, Peter's living a low-profile life in Milwaukee, renovating houses with his friend Lewis and trying to avoid the attention of the police. Unfortunately, he's having lunch with Lewis and his girlfriend, June Cassidy, in downtown Milwaukee when June spots a man with an assault rifle entering the Milwaukee public market. Peter and Lewis take off after the gunman, hoping to prevent a bloodbath, but nothing is as expected, and the events that follow are stranger than Peter could ever imagine, including a troubled inventor, a ruthless tech thief, a cheerful assassin, and revolutionary technology that may change our world forever.
Ooh,
I know.
Assassin. Well, you just mentioned something that I wanted to kind of get to right off the bat. There's book research, and then there's intimate knowledge of settings. And the opening sequence that you mentioned is set in a place you're intimately familiar with, and it's not someplace you just went and visited for probably a couple of days. So did you physically walk that path that Ash takes at the beginning in the marketplace while considering what the action and how it was going to unfold, or did you just simply draw on that burned in memory that you had of that location itself?
Well, I love the public market. We go there all the time, or at least we used to before the quarantine hit. Going someplace really sort of gets the imagination going, and there's really you know a place by going there or walking through it or whatever, but it's different when you think about it as a setting for a book. I sort of wrote a sort of a plan for the scene, and then I walked through the market and I thought about, okay, how many steps is it to here and how many steps to there, and what can you see from here? It was like I was, doing the recon as the shooter to sort of, kind of see what, how to describe it, how long things would take, because that's really important to me. I want the action to flow very sort of seamlessly and to be intuitive. And you can do it without doing a whole lot of research, but the research makes it so much easier.
Mm-hmm.
There's a line in The Breaker that says, humanity is in a race against itself, a race between our best intentions and our worst impulses. A character is referring to the light speed increase in technology and the ramifications, which is obviously one of the primary themes of your book. I'm interested in the spark, no pun intended, that inspired the novel. What got your creative instincts going in this direction?
Well, there was a piece, 2 or 3 years ago, and I can't remember where it was. It might have been the MIT Technology Review is a great online and in-print magazine about kind of the latest developments in technology, and it may very well have been there about what are called the big 5 technology companies, which are Facebook, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, and Apple. And between those 5 companies, they are making decisions that really are altering the culture of our entire world. And it is a very small group of people who are making those decisions. Basically, Facebook, to take that for example, Mark Zuckerberg has controlling interest. So there's a board of directors, but what Mark says goes. And his decisions about privacy and freedom of speech and that kind of stuff have had a huge impact on our society here in the U.S. and lots of others. So, the idea that somebody with a big idea could almost by themselves create a really cataclysmic change was kind of, that was sort of the impetus. That was the start of this.
Well, let me ask you this, because I know you, when you're doing your research and ruminating on all this, you had to have your own thoughts. How do we balance these massive advances with our ability to adapt to them? Is there an answer to that?
Well, I'm not sure there is, because the genie's kind of out of the bottle. One way to think about it. So again, back to Facebook, not to sort of beat on just Facebook, but their company motto in the early years was move fast and break things. Mm-hmm. And there's just not a lot of thought given to the consequences of that.
Right.
And there are places where they tend to think a little farther ahead. The U.S. is a more capitalist society than many, and the profit motive is huge, especially in tech. And I'm a capitalist myself. I don't have a problem with that. But we don't. That mindset does not lend itself to thinking super far ahead, right, and to considering the downstream ramifications. Whereas there are, like Europe, for example, really thinks about the principle is first do no harm. So they're way ahead of us in terms of privacy controls and being able to control how you're represented on the internet. All this kind of stuff. They're doing all of this, early antitrust stuff. So it's complicated. I don't know that there's a right answer. I really do think that we are, as humanity, in this race between, the wonderful things that we can accomplish with technology, and also, our those would be our better angels trying to make things better, and also our the devil on our shoulder trying to stir up trouble and to pursue self-interest at the cost of our society. So it's a big challenge. The NASA has this. This is my favorite thing, and this is actually probably the thing that got me started on this 8 or 10 years ago. NASA has an annual conference every year called. Oh my God, I can't remember the name of it, but it's basically, this is the premise, is that we are becoming more and more powerful, and how are we going to, make decisions as a society? It's the Singularity Conference. That's what it's called, and that's a term that was invented in the '60s by a science fiction writer, and it's the confluence of information technology, biotechnology, and nanotechnology, which is sort of the thing that is all coming. And to basically try to make some decisions ahead of time, like do we want to have constraints on artificial intelligence? Because at a certain point, it's going to be smarter than we are. It's going to make decisions faster. It's going to learn faster than we are. We're already using artificial intelligence to write code, to do all kinds of stuff. So this is, again, not to get super heavy, I find this stuff fascinating. But I don't know that there's a solution, and much smarter people than I are really thinking about this in a big way. It's interesting stuff.
Well, I, for one, welcome our AI overlords.
Kissing up already.
I'm getting on the record right now, but sticking with the inspiration theme, you had mentioned that the Wild One came to you fully formed in an airport. I am assuming that not all of your novels come to you fully formed. Otherwise, we would have to burn you at the stake.
Yeah.
How does it normally begin for you? What is usually the seed? Are you trying to work out a theme first? Does it begin with setting? Where does it usually begin with you?
Well, to the first part of your question, The Wild One is the only book that has ever shown up in that way. And it was also the hardest book that I have ever written. And I blew my deadline by 8 months. And given that the deadline is 12 months already, I basically I almost doubled my writing time on that book. So no need to tie me to a stake. But how it,
It's a book though, it's a special book.
Yeah.
well, it is, and it's near and dear to my heart in part for that reason. It's also something that's a departure from the series, which is also, I think, I mean, as a reader, I love it when other writers do something that's a departure, because I think it lets you experiment more and highlight some things that are just fun. So anyway, that's that book. That was last year. So usually when I'm halfway through a book or 2/3 of the way through a book, I start to think about the next book. And it's nothing I do on purpose. It's not deliberate. I just, these ideas begin to accumulate that I don't have a place to put. And so the logical place to think about that is the next book. So I make a note on a note card and I throw it in a box. And because what I don't want is to start growing the next book really before I've finished the first one, because that's just a recipe for disaster. Again, I'm not that bright. I really can't write 2 books at once. Even though I know people that do and generally hate them. But so then the book's out the door, and I've gone through a couple of rounds with my editor, and then I pull out the box and I go through the cards. And by then, enough cards on enough themes have started to sort of coalesce that there's something that's starting to gel. And with the breaker, it was that I wanted to write another technology book. So my second book, Burning Bright, was also kind of a technology book. And I'm a big geek. I read a lot of sci-fi as a kid. I think about those issues, and I'm interested in technology in general as an adult. So I wanted to do that. And I also wanted to, because the previous book, June was really just a voice on the phone. June Cassidy, who is Peter's love interest, and his friend Lewis, who is, kind of like the, sort of the cleanup man. Lewis wasn't in it at all, and I wanted to correct those problems. And what they weren't problems, but I wanted to have them show up early. And Lewis lives in Milwaukee, and so I thought, well, one way to do that is to set the book in Milwaukee, and to have Peter living with June in Milwaukee. And so that's kind of how Milwaukee got chosen. And it was also because writing a book set in a foreign country was a real challenge, and I wanted to give myself something easier to do. I wanted to write about my hometown. And also the technology piece and Milwaukee were a good fit, because Milwaukee is an old manufacturing town. It has a long history. Its nickname for, 50 years, 70 years was the machine shop to the world. So Milwaukee was at the forefront of manufacturing technology for decades. So we made the machines that made stuff. So, I wanted to play with that as well. So, and those are all sort of separate things. And this is not necessarily a conscious decision, any of it. They just sort of pop into my head, and I write it down on a 3x5 card, and then I pull them out and I go, oh, this is kind of what I was thinking about.
Well, you blew right into my other question I had for you in terms of do you think ahead? Do you think ahead beyond where you're at? But let me take that one step further. So you're in book 6 here. Have you considered or play with the idea of a whole new series or a whole new set of characters? Is that something that you've entertained or would entertain?
I have so right now I'm about 25,000 words into the next one.
Okay.
And it was really hard to get started. I had sort of a couple of really ugly false starts, because for this book, the book that was showing up in my head was not a Peter Ash book. And so I had to sort of take some steps to kind of get that, sort of put that away so I could focus on this next book. But I think that standalone novel is going to be the book after Peter Ash 7, which is what I'm writing right now. At least that's my goal. I still have to convince my editor and my publisher and also my agent. But you know, I sort of know what the pitch is, and I'm not gonna share it with you guys because it's still sort of percolating. But I don't know. I think it'll be interesting. So, you know, one of the challenges of writing a series is that, you know, you want to keep things fresh. And did I do this before? Did I do that before?
Yeah.
And so that's, you know, it's becoming harder to think of new things to try, to not hit the same notes.
Right.
Well, I'll tell you, so far you've done a splendid job of doing that. Actually, I find myself really drawn to the subject matter that Peter falls into each time. I had zero interest in the legal marijuana trade until Light It Up, and then I started reading that, and I thought, this is a really fascinating subject, and so I read kind of peripheral pieces on that subject matter, just because it's almost like you get curious about something, and then Peter's in that realm. So I guess as long as you're curious, you're probably still going to have fresh stories for him, because that's what it, for me as a writer looking at it, it looks like, oh, Nick found this interesting and decided this would be a great place to put Peter. And yet, and like, almost like you're learning about each subject that you're writing about, as an area of curiosity. At least that's how it comes across. Is that accurate at all?
No, that's absolutely what it is. It's you, for me, I just find something that, I sort of can't let go of. Mm-hmm. And I try not to lean too heavily on that piece of it. I mean, some of the books are a little more, kind of about something, but I think crime fiction needs to be about something.
Yeah. In
order to be interesting. And the, really the best stuff in crime fiction is really social commentary. It's looking at the world that we live in a from an angle. If it's just, the books that are just plot in a city you can't identify are less interesting to me. I mean, again, sometimes that's done beautifully, but I like books that are about something. So yeah, I mean, I'm just kind of following the things I'm curious about. The way this book unfolds, I mean, I wasn't really thinking about sort of how this might actually happen until it was like, well, I guess I have to figure out, how this would actually happen. And, it's an interesting process, and it's, mm-hmm. My biggest fear in life is being bored, and this is one way for me of keeping myself interested in life in general.
Well, you straddle that line very well. I mean, like I don't ever feel like it's a message book. It's just always about, like you said, it's about something, but it's never slows the plot down. It's almost like you're on this breakneck pace and you're learning about a new subject. So I think you're mastering that pretty well. Something else you master really well. Peter's assembled quite a menagerie of friends among the supporting characters you've created. You introduced Lewis and Dinah right off the bat in The Drifter, June and Burning Bright, and more recently, Fran, who I freaking love.
Yeah.
When did you know these characters might stick, and what makes you decide to keep a character around versus sort of a transitory one-off?
Well, the way I think about it is that there are really only 3 recurring characters in the series. There's Peter, June, and Lewis. And they each have, kind of an ancillary world around them. Although June is like Peter, sort of, in a way, kind of alone in the world. Although we see June, this was one of my favorite things to do with this book, was we see June's professional life in this book. Mm-hmm. We see June at work. We see how smart she is. We see how she's, confronting her work challenges. So that was fun to do. But, so far I really haven't had anybody come back except one character in this book is a return character. And I didn't know when that would happen, but because it's a technology book, it's an opportunity to sort of enlarge that world a little bit. The stuff that the series that I like are the series that where the world becomes more populated as you go. I think about like Robert Parker's Spencer books. There's, he knows a couple of lawyers, he knows some cops, and those, that world expanded as the series grew. I'm trying to think about who else has done that particularly well. Robert Crace has done that well.
Yeah.
And so, I don't want this super, I don't want 400 characters.
Right.
I actually, there's a point in every book where I count the characters that I have, because I don't want to have too many people to keep track of,
Yeah.
both for myself as a writer and for the reader, because that's a pet peeve of mine. As a reader, it's like, wait, who is this person again?
Mm-hmm.
But it's a little too early. I mean, I sort of feel like it's a little too early to have callbacks, but I have characters that I would love to write about again. Eli Bell from Tear It Down, I would love to see him farther along in his life. There's a couple bad guys who I would love to have come back.
Mm-hmm.
So I have some stuff that's sort of percolating, but I don't think you can feed on your own ancillary characters too much. Again, this is just what I do, because I don't want every book to be dependent on a longer and longer backstory.
Yeah.
Right.
He's a fantasy writer named Jim Butcher, who writes these great sort of crime fighting wizard books set in Chicago.
Nice.
And he's really good on those books, were a lot of fun. But as that series went along, he had to pay more and more service to all the things that happened before and all the conflict that the characters involved in on an ongoing basis. And I had to stop reading him because it was like there were like 6 chapters of backstory that had nothing really to do with the current book, but he just sort of had to, refresh your memory because somebody shows up in one scene. And so my goal is to have people be able to access this series from any book in any order, even though I'm kind of a fanatic for reading in order. And I know there are lots of people who do that, but it's easier to grow an audience if, readers can find you however they find you. So that's kind of part of the goal. So every book I'm trying to introduce somebody who you might want to see again, and I want to introduce a bad guy that may or may not make it through, because I love books where the bad guy comes back in another book, where somebody particularly strange or nasty shows up again.
Dr. Evil.
So you mentioned before in the last pod that you were a business owner for many, many years and a contractor for many, many years, but you've successfully made the jump to full-time writer. So for us process junkies, what does your day look like now as opposed to how it looked like then when you were trying to squeeze in writing? When does your day begin? Are you trying to hit a word count? What constitutes a successful day for you now?
Well, this is sort of a strange week because this is, this is kind of chore week, because the book is going to come out on January 12th, and I have this long to-do list of stuff that is not writing the next book, that is, to, get the breaker out in the world. And I am not a very good multitasker, and so when those tasks build up enough, I basically just say, something, I'm not a writer this week. I'm a writing promoter this week. So I wrote a bunch of newsletters. I, had a couple of conversations with my editor and publicity people. This is my, I'm doing a couple of podcasts this week. So it's just, this is sort of one of those weeks. So that's not really a how does my writing life go, but that's a chunk of the writing life that I never knew existed until I became a published author, and it seems to be a larger portion of what I do every year, and that's a good thing that there are people interested. But I'm trying to have fun with it and to remind myself that this is part of the job as well. So I wrote this week I wrote a blog post to be a guest blogger on Kim Howe's Rogue Women Writers site.
Mm-hmm.
So like that was a bunch of fun to do, and it's a different muscle than writing a novel, and it's something that like I get to do as part of this. But normally, I try to be up by 7. Today I was up at 5 because my brain was just going. That's just life. But so try to get up by 7. I do a few stretches so my body doesn't hurt all day. Being a carpenter for 15 years is not. I don't recommend that. And I meditate every morning as well, which I find really kind of helps keep the crazy down. I make some coffee, I make some oatmeal, and for me the rule is I don't get to have either one until I'm sitting in my office with the document open, and I don't have to write. I don't have to work on it. Certainly not until I'm done with my breakfast. But my eye sort of goes across what I've been working on yesterday or the day before, and I sort of oh hey, there's a sentence that could be better, or that's not really clear, or is this the right order for these paragraphs to be in? And I'll just start messing around with something I did yesterday or the day before. I try not to go back much farther than the day before, and I polish what's there, and that kind of acts as a sort of a starter's ramp for the what happens next. And sometimes I have a plan. I'm in the middle of a scene and I know how the scene's going to end and I know what the next scene's going to be, and those are really good days because I can just kind of go. Some days I have made the mistake of finishing the day as I finish the scene, and I find myself a little marooned. So those are days when I will lean back in the chair and I'll grab my journal, which is somewhere around here. Where did it go? Well, it looks like this. Oh, there it is. And I'll just ask myself the question, and I write with a fountain pen because it's beautiful in the hand, and I can write really quickly by hand with a fountain pen. And I just ask myself, okay, so what happens next? Maybe it's this, maybe it's, and it's like talking to myself on paper, and that's often how I will find sort of the next piece. Or sometimes I'm unhappy with what I wrote the day before or the last week, and I'll say, what's wrong with this? So part of it is just sort of talking to myself as if I actually knew what the answers were. But I mean, that's kind of how I find the answers.
Yeah.
And I second cup of coffee is somewhere between 10 or 11. I have lunch because usually I'm really rolling by then. Wait a minute. And I have lunch around 2 or 3. I go for a walk and I go back to work until 5 or 6. So that's a good day, and a good day is 1,500 words.
Oh, sounds good to me too. With COVID kind of keeping you from traveling, obviously, along with looking for a little bit of ease of sticking with Milwaukee, did you ever have any thoughts about how much more accurate you needed to be, given that this is your hometown setting, and what maybe even your local fans might try and pick apart in the story based on the scenes of what you wrote? Did that ever enter your mind at all?
I try every book I write. I really try to have every place that I mention be a real place. Every street that I describe is a street I've been on. It may not be that exact street, but so like for The Drifter, I found a bunch of the action takes place in this kind of empty, disused warehouse space in River West, and I found the building. I drove around and I walked around and I thought, okay, that'll do. And I didn't put that building. It wasn't on the street I wanted it to be on, but I knew what the building was, and I knew that the building would fit on the street that it was on. So, you know, and that's kind of been my process all the way through. And I don't think I could have done this 20 years ago before, you know, Google Maps and everything else. Research is a lot easier on all of this. But, you know, there's a foot chase in Tear It Down. And, you know, if you wanted to, you could follow the course of that foot chase. And you would have that, you know, you would see the things that the characters see. You would walk through the places that the characters walk through. And so that, to me, you know, it's not about, well, in part it's about having it be accurate for the fans, but it's really about, it's just part of how I work. And the thing that I get nervous about, for example, with Light It Up, which takes place in Denver, and especially with Tear It Down, the Memphis book, was like, what are they going to think of the book? Because the places are all real places, but like, am I portraying Memphis in a way that people who live in Memphis are going to appreciate or not? So that's kind of my fear, is that I want it to feel like their town.
Yeah.
And I've had nothing but positives, but, you know, I'm kind of a worrywart, and I put a lot of effort into it.
Well, Nick, I've unabashedly praised your writing ability, whether you're here or not. Barbara Powell, when she was on the show, we talked about you quite a bit.
Yeah.
But we're all our own worst critics, except for Mike. I'm Mike's worst critic. But what areas do you think you've improved on from book 1 to book 6? And is there any area you feel like you're still feeling your way through when it comes to writing?
What have I improved on? I don't know. I mean, I have one of my little 3x5 cards says that my primary task is to write a new and better book every year. So I really think about getting better, but I'm so deep in the weeds of the process that it's hard for me to gauge that. I do think that, like, for example, this book is a much faster read than previous books, and readers have told me that this book really flies.
It does.
It does.
You know, the Wild One, I was really thinking about landscape and, you know, sort of the emotional content of landscape. And I don't do a whole lot of that in the current book. So part of it is that I'm trying to push the envelope on some skill set in every book. You know, Burning Bright was, you know, I don't think I'd ever really written a love story. And so that, you know, this is how Peter and June meet, is in Burning Bright.
Yeah.
So I kind of give myself a task for every book, and I don't, it's not always stated. Right. You know, it's not something I stick up on my bulletin board necessarily, but it helps to have some organizing principle to say, here's what I'm trying to accomplish in terms of what I do as a writer.
Yeah. Nice.
Great.
So we all have our side hustles. I know you happen to have a side hustle in that you interview authors passing through your neck of the woods on their book tours. So much so that you could practically be a Crew Review's local Milwaukee correspondent.
We'll vouch for that.
Yeah.
That'd be great. I'd love to do that.
Yeah.
So what is some of the best wisdom that you have gleaned from those authors passing through? And feel free to share their names, but what are some of the best nuggets that you've got? What are some of the things that have helped you with your writing, that have freed you up?
Well, so I mentioned that The Wild One was really a hard book for me, and I went the tour for the book before that. I hadn't finished The Wild One, and it was really giving me trouble. But when I went on tour for the previous book, which is Tear It Down, I deliberately wanted to do events with other authors because I wanted an excuse to pick their brains. And so, and unlike the virtual stuff, which is fun, but you don't get the beer in the bar, before or after. And to me, that's the best part about interviewing authors, is you get to talk to people who share your disease, right? So during the course of that tour, I asked a lot of people for advice, and I got really good advice. I did an event with a guy who is a New York Times #1 bestseller, who told me that he still feels imposter syndrome. And at the time, I think he'd written 16 or 17 books. Was very generous and sort of saying, this is absolutely part of my day every day. And it's gotten better, but it's still there. And you just sort of learn to work with it. I asked another writer who had started writing when he was in his early 20s and had been published in his early 20s. And so he was on book 25 or something. And I sort of said, look, I'm having this problem, and what advice would you have given yourself at this point? And he was super generous. One of the things that was jamming me up with that book is that was the first book where they actually paid me enough to live on.
Oof.
And that was the book for which I had quit my day job. And that book suddenly became so fucking important. And it had to be so much better than everything else because, just like in my head, it had become this giant fucking thing. And over, these writers said to me, hey, they're paying you this money because of the last books, not because of the next books. That's how this works. So forget about that piece. And it doesn't have to be miles better. It just has to be as good as the last one. It actually doesn't even have to be. A lot of them said, you're doing fine. It doesn't actually even have to be as good as the last one. Just turn it in. And some people are very bloody minded about how they work. Some people are very conscious of being commercial writers, and it's X words a day, and they build an outline, and it's like building a garage. It's a straightforward process, and it's not easy, and sometimes you hit your thumb, and sometimes you have to tear down a wall and build it again. But they're very straightforward about it. And for me, I wish it was that way for me. For me, it's all so very I don't know what. I feel like I'm doing some crazy little dance, but I don't know the footwork, and I can't see my partner, and I just keep moving, and eventually the music ends, and that's kind of what my writing process is like. I read somewhere to further add to the metaphor that writing a new book is like discovering a new mathematical formula. And every book is a new mathematical formula. And it's not making widgets. And people, I know authors who think of it as making widgets, whether they'll say that or not. And they're great writers, and they're great books, but their mindset is that. Whereas mine, it's like in order for me to be happy with what I do, I feel like it has to be something entirely new. It's a new language. It's a new formula every time. And it's not easy. I'm not a fast writer. I'd love to be somebody who could write 2 books a year. I'm not sure that's ever going to happen. But I can't do it any other way. I've tried to be more bloody minded about it. I've tried to be more methodical about it, and it just doesn't work for me.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned you are 25,000 words into your next project. It is a Peter Ash novel. So since nobody watches our show, I figured just between the 4 of us, you could mention maybe some strong tidbits, or what can you or can't you maybe reveal about what your next project looks like?
Well, I can tell you that it's set in rural Nebraska.
Oh.
And it begins with Peter running into a pregnant woman whose car has broken down by the side of a gravel road. and he offers to give her a ride. And it turns out that her ex-cop, ex-boyfriend is very unhappy about this.
Oh.
And so hilarity ensues, let's just say. Not hilarity.
Nice guys.
Murder ensues. Violence.
A weird sense of humor.
Let that be a lesson to you people. Don't help pregnant women in rural.
Don't ever stop for pregnant women on the side of the road.
Well, it's funny because I have to keep giving Peter a reason to get involved.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, June doesn't really want Peter to be sticking his nose into, you know, all of this stuff every time. So like for this one, I was like, what can Peter not resist? Who could resist stopping to help a young pregnant woman whose car is broken down?
Yeah.
Right. So Peter can't be faulted. He's a good guy. He's just doing his good guy thing.
Yeah.
And it's not his fault that there's an unpleasant person in the wings.
Wow.
And Peter's got to deal with it.
Funny you said who can resist that? When my wife was 9 months pregnant with my youngest, she broke down, and for an hour cars passed her as she walked to a farm. She was at kind of a semi-rural area. For an hour, cars passed this 9-month pregnant woman as she walked to the nearest farmhouse, who wouldn't let her use their phone, so she had to go to the next house.
Man, so much for Midwestern.
True story.
Oh my goodness.
Wouldn't have been very good for your book, but it's a true story.
For shame.
Yes.
That's what's wrong with America today.
I was going to say that, and you're staying domestic again. So, okay, well, we'll see what the rest of middle America looks like. All right. So with that question already answered, I want to welcome yet another person to the show. And she happens to have the same last name, which is a crazy coincidence, but we'll have to see what she has to say about that.
I am in serious trouble, I can tell already.
Oh.
Hi, sweetie.
Beautiful.
You didn't think it was your mom, did you?
Oh, no, that would be not so good.
All right. Well, Sean, why don't you introduce this wonderful person?
Well, welcome Margaret Petrie, who is Nick's wife, but also an artist, a visual artist herself. In fact, if you look over Nick's right shoulder, which is to our left, you will see one of Margaret's pieces, I believe.
Look at that.
One of my pieces. There's another one back there.
Okay. And Margaret also has a podcast. Margaret, go ahead and pitch your podcast here. What's your podcast?
Oh, thank you. I do have a podcast. I started it in June. It's called Authentic Obsessions. And I talk to creative people and artists of all kinds about sort of the messy, complicated, contradictory life that's behind the work that they do. So kind of like, you know, how does the sausage get made? Not from a technical aspect, but what are the emotional and mental aspects of all of that? Because I know all of us feel alone a lot of the time in our minds and what our mind is telling us when we're creating things. And I just think it's really important to tell people that they're not alone and we all feel this way. And I interviewed Nick for one of them too. So it was interesting to have a writer in the mix, and I've interviewed a filmmaker and a lot of visual artists too. So it's really fun.
Wow.
I know why you guys do this.
It's a good idea.
We have a lot of writers among our viewers, and I would recommend your podcast because there's a lot of similarities between the different creatives and the different challenges.
Yeah.
And
the personalities are a lot alike.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we've had a ton of writers on the show, but we have not had a writer's spouse on the show.
Right.
So let's dig into a little bit of that perspective.
Oh dear.
You've watched Nick for his entire career. In fact, you've watched him before he had a career. So what insights have you learned about him watching him go through this process?
What insights have I learned about him? You know, a lot of this has come, you know, how long have you been married? Over 20 years, right?
Only somebody that's been married that long can do that and not get in trouble.
I knew I married an introvert. I knew I married a man who had to write to be happy. I knew that that was part of his being, but to understand it rationally and then to live with it every day and to see the sacrifices that he makes for his family and, activities. When Duncan was little, we'd always want to go on hikes on a Sunday, and Nick's like, gotta work, gotta write. And, it's all paid off and it's great, but I think it's just so nice to mostly be at peace with how he is and what his process is like, right? And not to be mad about it, and to see the fruition of his labor. So I don't know.
It took a long time to get there.
It did take
and you said something, I think, in your interview with him that I thought was great. I at least you either said it then or said it in a discussion we had. But sometimes writing is standing over the coffee pot, holding a coffee mug. And I wish more spouses knew that and no, they know it, but believed it.
Yeah.
But I thought that was a great insight.
What was great about interviewing Nick for a podcast was that we were in separate rooms. I was interviewing him from more of an objective standpoint and not as my spouse. So I was asking him questions that I ask every creative, and to have him answer, something clicked when we did that podcast, Nick, and I really viscerally understood for the first time, I think, which seems crazy, that in the morning when you're making coffee and I'm ready to figure out my day and I want to talk to you about 7 things that I'm going to do during the day that might affect you, and you're like, I can't talk. I'm like, really? It's just this one thing. And you would get so frustrated, like you're putting all of this stuff in my mind, and it needs to be clear for the writing. But that was really great. I mean, that really helped me understand it in a different way. So I'm glad somebody else.
Podcasts saved marriages, people.
Yeah, that was a question that I had was, what are the most challenging aspects of being married to a writer? I think you covered that, but what are some of the more rewarding aspects? I know we're a pain to live with. That is
so true.
What are, boost our confidence. What's a rewarding thing of being married to a writer?
Well, I think one of the great things is that he understands me, because even though we have different personalities, and that, I mean, I'm totally glass half full and Nick is glass half empty, going toward glass more full than empty, maybe, right?
I'm working on it.
We're all growing as a person, right?
Yeah.
I mean, there's still a lot of similarities, right, between a creative life. And I feel like Nick has given me permission to do what I need to do for my creative life and my artistic life, and that he's so understanding that he has pushed me toward this in ways that I couldn't push myself. And I don't think that I would be here at this place in my art, if you want to call it a career. I mean, I do have a day job, but in this place that I'm at, if it wasn't for your understanding of how it is to be a creative person,
Aww, that's sweet.
Yeah.
True though.
We're going to spin off the show into the crew counseling and really make some money.
We got to come up with an hourly rate, folks.
Hey, I was going to say it's cheaper.
Yeah. All right. Well, let me ask you this, Margaret. What you're a fellow creative, obviously, but you're more of a visual arts, and he's more of a written arts that has visual components to it. What do you think is or are potentially the major differences in the thought process of somebody that sits in your world primarily and someone who sits in Nick's world primarily?
Well, I'm going to start by saying that I'm going to start with a similarity that I think they're both pretty isolating. However, I have a way more opportunity to be social and to get out there with a community, because for 8 hours a day or whatever it is, you guys, however you write, 4 hours, 10 hours, but for this giant chunk of time, you're alone in your head. Like, it's the only way to get words on a paper, right? Is to be by yourself. And even if you're in a cafe or whatever, you're still in your own head by yourself, trying to figure out how to put a sentence together. And I feel like I have an opportunity to have an artist community. I mean, I can go, work in a studio space with 10 other artists and talk during the day, and we
Yeah.
can. So I feel like as an artist, I can be more social if I want to. That said, there are a lot of artists who prefer to be alone in their head like writers do. Let's see. What else? I don't know. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, no, it was a perfect answer.
The thing that I'm jealous of that Margaret gets to do is that she gets to iterate much more quickly. It takes me a year to write a book. Margaret can make a piece in an hour or a day or a week and look at it and say, how did this go? And then try it again and do it a little bit differently, or say, well, that was a failure. Let me try that. Let me try something else. And I, when you're writing a novel, it's a much longer loop. And there's just not the opportunities for feedback, for self, to examine the work yourself, to show the work to others. It's just a whole different ballgame. And I'm totally jealous of that.
Let me ask you this, because go ahead, Margaret.
Do you get locked up? Like, I know as writers, we'll get stuck on a plot point or get some feedback to make a change and we don't know how to do it. And I will stand in the kitchen and time will pass and I will realize I haven't showered. It's been 2 days. My family has crossed the room. They say hi. I don't see anything. Like, do you have that sort of reaction in your creative process too? Do you have points where you're sort of locked up and trying to work something out in your head?
Oh, for sure. And whether I feel like the podcast is also part of creative work because of all the research that I do ahead of time and the reaching out that I do to artists and all of that. So, but with actually creating prints, cutting and pasting my collage, I get in that too, where hours go by and, I try and shower every day. However, but when I'm in the studio and I look at this grid, I have done these collages where there are 220 3-inch grids. So each 3-inch grid has a little tiny collage in it. And so I'm faced with this 4-foot by 3-foot paper. And I'm like, I don't know. This is all wrong. It all looks terrible. Everything I've done, I'm just going to, throw this one away. And then Nick comes in and he'll be like, hey, that's really cool. And I'm like, really? Are you just saying that? And I don't think he does. He doesn't just say that. He'll tell me if he thinks it's crap. But I totally get stuck. And sometimes what I have to do is just do something completely different. Just put it aside. And instead of cutting and pasting, do some intuitive big painting or something like that. So to take me out of the work that I'm doing to something else to kind of loosen me up. And I don't know I guess writers, I don't know, you write in your journal or you write a poem or I don't know, you do something differently maybe?
I guess the key to a happy marriage is to just not be blocked at the same time.
Yeah, no kidding, right?
Yeah.
Well, I know a writer who talks about having a cheat project. Chris Lee talks about having a cheat project where if one is not going well, he cheats on it with another project.
Huh.
So that is, I'm not sure that's something that would work for me. He's also someone who's always got 6 or 7 things going at once, which is also not something that would work for me. But
yeah.
In any capacity, let's just.
No, I was going to say, I don't think the main differences between us are that you're an optimist and I'm not an optimist. I think the main differences are that you are the queen of multitasking and you go for days without ever sitting down except to eat a meal.
Okay, but let's be clear. Multitasking is different than doing a lot of things. Because multitasking isn't really a great thing to do, but I do have my fingers in a lot of projects and I can hold space for a podcast, visual art, my day job, cooking. I'm sorry, that's women too, or mothers. And
yeah, that sounds like
your description sounded really a lot like our household.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just, we're just wired differently. It's just biological. But I do have quite a bit more energy, maybe. for all that stuff? Capacity?
Capacity. Well, and yeah, I remember that once you referred to me as a lazy fuck.
Well, let's not bring
Yeah,
that
but our
into
counseling
our
business
show.
is failing.
No. What she said was, "You're not a lazy fuck." I believe that's what she said. But for me, right, like work often does look like staring out the window or making coffee.
Yeah.
And Margaret's brain is still going a million miles an hour, but that's not what she does. What she does is shift gears to something else and let her subconscious work on it. So it's really an interesting process to learn how she works and to have her get a better sense of how I work, and to appreciate it, and to not, for example, think that the other one is a lazy fuck.
Right.
The worst thing I ever said to my wife was I told her a word count on a very productive day. I said, "Oh my gosh, I got X amount of words done." So every day thereafter, it was, "Oh, how many words did you get in there?" I was like,
Yeah, that was the measure.
but I was
of all.
really productive. I worked out a story problem, and that I was anyway. Well, Margaret, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit.
Oh God.
I'm also putting Nick on the spot because I think my wife would probably struggle with this quiz I'm going to give you.
Oh no.
This is a quiz. I'm going to say a writer's term, and I if you know it, tell me what it is. If you don't, just say pass.
Do we buzz in or?
No, this is just you. This is just you.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So query. Do you know what a query is?
Yes.
Okay.
Am I supposed to tell you what it is?
Yeah, if you could just give me a real quick answer.
I would say my first experience with querying was Nick querying agents to try and find an agent.
Okay.
Writing a bunch of letters and getting a lot of rejections.
Thanks, honey.
Well,
Found the
That's
perfect.
how it works.
well, related to that, slush pile.
Is that me still?
Yeah.
Yes, these are all you.
baby.
Slush pile. Isn't that just like the pile of crap that you write that maybe that you crumple up in a ball and throw in the trash can?
That's manuscript.
In this case, it's on the agent's desk, and it could be a pile of crap, but it could also there could be some genius in there, and that's either the ones that they've semi-passed on or they haven't even read yet, and they
I
came in.
hope Barbara doesn't hear this. Okay.
Okay, arcs.
Oh, advanced reader copy.
All right, there you go. And blurb.
Oh, the thing that you really hope someone famous writes for your book, and it goes.
Yeah, there you go.
You mean the one that's on every cover of Nick's? It says from Lee
The best
Child.
thing ever.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that might be one of the best blurbs in the industry.
That's true.
Okay, yay. See, so you guys do talk about your stuff. There are
right.
a couple others, comps, WIP.
Work in
Yeah,
progress.
there you go.
Yeah.
Congratulations, you are qualified to be a writer's wife. We will send you a writer in the mail.
Can I request one with hair?
Hey.
Oh, on the head.
My wife
or
would rather have
elsewhere?
the carpentry skills than this hair.
Well,
Yeah.
that's assuming that there's time to do carpentry.
That's a good point.
All right. Well, Margaret and Nick and Bill, this is the end of the traditional portion of our interview, and that deserves a glass up from everybody here. Congratulations. Hope we didn't ruin your career, but now we're moving on to the portion where we possibly could. And this is called the lightning round. And these are a series of questions written by our lovely staff, and Mrs. Petrie is joining in on this. And since today I am the host, I'm going to go first. And Nick, you know how this goes, so hopefully you're prepared. Number one, Nick, does your wife know about the female groupies known to swarm thriller authors whenever they're forced to leave their homes?
Okay, now you've blown it. Oh my God. Yeah, I can't believe I can't believe you're letting this get out. Well, she does now.
Yeah.
And the giveaway was all the underwear on the front porch.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Is he keeping any? That's the question.
But it was legible, the writing on the underwear.
Yeah, for sure. The phone numbers were
Really
legible.
literary.
Oh, man. All right. Number two. Nick, both you and Bill are represented by the same agent, the amazing Barbara Poel. What do you think set her down this dark path?
I don't know. I do know that she wanted to be a stand-up comic, which if you've talked to her, you will understand.
Oh yeah.
So I think maybe that did not go the way she wanted it to go, or maybe she just wanted to try books.
And try something.
I don't
more
know.
difficult.
Do you know the answer to that, Bill?
Look, I don't know or care why Jaws, got set down a dark path. All I care is how do you stop Jaws? Nobody cares about the origin story of the shark. You just want to jam the aqualung and, I don't know.
And in this rendition, Barbara is the shark?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, whew. Wait, we're gonna unwrap that in another episode, I think.
Oh man.
But we love her.
All right, Nick. Number 3 and my last one. Let us burn down the internet. Who makes the best power tools?
It really depends on what tool you're talking about. So like, I have a Bosch jigsaw. I have a big Delta table saw. I have a couple of Makita cordless drills. I think it just really depends on what they're making. Although I'm interested, Festool, this German company called Festool, makes all of these super high-end power tools and I don't own any because they sort of showed up after my professional career and I can't justify paying the amount of money for them. Margaret would probably murder me in my sleep.
Or while you were awake with a Bosch jigsaw.
No.
All right. Well,
We have another guest star, by the way.
I was going to
Who's
say,
that?
we've got Animal Kingdom showing up here now.
Oh, that's Otis.
Otis should talk to my German Shepherd here. Let me go get her. No. All right.
Okay. All my questions are actually book related in a way. So June Cassidy is a badass, and it's clear that she scares Peter a bit. I think we can all agree on that. With that as background, have you done everything Margaret has asked you to do this week on your list?
No, just today. I was going to go for a walk after lunch, and Barbara said, "Will you take this? Would you take this peanut butter jar over to our neighbor?" What?
You said Barbara.
Oh, Margaret. Sorry.
Oh, man.
We'll edit that out in post.
How much is that worth to you?
I was supposed to take an empty peanut butter jar over to the neighbor's dog. And Margaret asked me for it. I put on my coat and walked out the door. It was sitting right by the door and I left it behind.
All right.
All right. Next book related question. Lewis is that friend that we all wish we had or have, who does whatever Peter needs. Regardless of legality, regardless of consequences, Lewis is up for it. Who is Lewis in your life?
Ooh.
Do you have a Lewis, Margaret?
Well, Kathleen.
Oh yeah, that's true. Kathleen is like Lewis. Yeah.
Might be your Lewis too.
She could be my Lewis. I was going to say Bill Schweigert is my Lewis.
Oh,
Bill Schweigert would be a great Lewis.
He'd make a good one.
An incompetent Lewis.
But he wears great outfits.
All right, my last question. Peter has been to California. He's been to Colorado. He's been to Memphis. He's been to Iceland. And of course, Milwaukee. How many books will you have to write before you consider bringing Peter to the thrilling world of Kokomo, Indiana, for the readers that are hungry to experience this fascinating slice of Americana?
150?
Okay. I can't wait.
Oh, man.
Peter Ash 150. It's going to be awesome.
It'd be a novella.
I don't know. Peter could drive through Kokomo in the book I'm working on now. I mean, he might not stop in Kokomo, but he could drive through it.
Hey, we have the world's largest steer. It's stuffed and it died in 1908. And we also have the world's largest sycamore stump.
Yeah. Incorporate that into your story.
And
those are a real draw for me.
Oh, all right, Mr. Schweigert.
All right.
What have you crafted for us?
Uh-oh.
So Nick, I've got the hard-hitting questions that everybody wants to know. And Margaret is there to check your math. So what is the longest you've left food dropped on the floor before picking it up and eating it?
Oh, yes.
And eating it?
Yes.
Less than 5 seconds.
Oh, I don't believe that.
Maybe 15 seconds.
See, the truth comes out.
20 minutes. Depends what it is. Like if it's a potato chip, like there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's
Okay, how long have you ever eaten something that you found between the couch cushions like a potato chip? That didn't seem to be that old.
no, that's not really a thing for me. I'm not.
Just checking.
No.
Halloween candy? Yeah. All right.
Well, yeah. If it's wrapped. Anyway.
Good answer. So suppose some bad shit goes down at the North Pole. I don't know, an elf gets kidnapped. So of course, Santa has to ask Peter Ash for assistance. Assuming Peter comes through, how would Santa reward Peter? I assume he's too proud to ask for a gift himself, but what would Santa get Peter Ash for Christmas?
Oh my goodness, that's a great
Can't
question.
say take away the white static. Santa can't do everything.
What would Peter like for Christmas? Oh my God, I've never considered that. That is not part of my backstory Peter Ash project.
You know he's going to work on it tonight.
Holy crap.
Think of anything? I can think of things.
Well, what do you think?
I think he might like need a new cook stove or outfit the back of the truck with some like cool shit.
Oh, that's not a bad idea.
There you go.
Little man cave in the back of the pickup.
Yeah, maybe a new tent.
There
Great.
you go. All right.
It's a good thing Margaret showed up.
Yeah. It's going to be a long program without her.
In my whole life, in fact.
So exactly. My third and final question is, Peter Ash reminds me a lot of 80s pop icon and famous redhead Rick Astley, because he's never going to give you up. Please name 2 other things that Rick Astley would never do.
He's never going to let you down.
Right.
I can't believe I know this. What else isn't it? Never gonna. That's about all I got. What do you? Come on, Margaret. Do you know the song?
I don't know who Rick Astley is.
All I know is the song.
All right.
Oh.
Well, he's never going to let you down.
Right.
He's never going to run around and desert you. He's never going to make you cry. He'll never say a lie, and he'll never tell a lie and hurt you. So I'm afraid there's no room for you in my Rick Astley cover band.
Oh, Nick, you had one shot in life.
Sorry.
I think that's a really good comparison, though. I think those are all things Peter Ash would not do.
Right.
Yeah. Peter Ash, was it really Peter Astley initially? And you were like, that's too obvious. So it's Peter Ash.
It could be.
Short
It
of
could
it. Yeah.
Breaking news. All right. Margaret.
Margaret's up. We cannot wait for this one.
Oh dear.
Margaret has her lightning round questions for you.
All right. What is the best thing you've taught Duncan besides curse words? Duncan is our
I would like to point out that you taught Duncan his first curse word.
your father.
Remember?
Duncan his first curse
Well,
word.
or my mother, it could have been. What's the best thing I've taught Duncan? I don't know. I hope that it's okay to fail as long as you keep trying.
There you go.
Yeah.
Good answer.
Yeah.
Great answer.
Yeah. All right. Number 2, city mouse or country mouse, and why?
Oh, see, that's tough. That's tough. We live in a sort of semi-urban suburb, so I like my sidewalks. I'm walking distance to a library and a couple of grocery stores and a couple of bars and a great coffee shop, 2 great coffee shops. But I kind of have a fantasy about having some little shack in the woods where no one would ever bother me. But this is a conversation Margaret and I have had ad infinitum for many years.
And clearly no resolution.
No, definitely not.
No plan in place.
All right. The last one. So Duncan's a great cook. Our son's a great cook. He turned us into vegetarians about a year ago when he was home from university. And I guess we've slipped up a little bit, but for the most part,
Vegetarians.
really embraced it. Well,
That's the name of his cow.
well, yeah, except that sausage I ate last night. What is a meal that Duncan used to make that you really miss?
That great cauliflower curry
Ooh,
he used to make. Duncan's, for me, the all-time best thing that Duncan makes is pizza and eggs, which is leftover pizza heated up in a frying pan, cut into pieces, and then scrambled eggs around it.
Oh,
And that is like,
wow.
that is my happy place.
Oh man, that's comfort food city.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that sounds good. Total Midwestern. Was that it, Margaret?
Yeah, mostly. I had this
Aw.
thing about, well, I didn't want to be too mean. Oh.
There's a first time
Watch the show. Have you not watched the show, Margaret?
Come on, Margaret. Let's go.
You know, you guys are gone. You guys are far away.
I can edit it out if it doesn't go well.
So I'm sort of curious if you think of yourself as, let's just call it highly focused or a lazy fuck. So there's this. So when you get up in the morning and you start making coffee, you have this inability to like make coffee and breakfast at the same time. And like making breakfast includes like starting water to boil, right? So, and it only annoys me when I'm waiting for you to make my oatmeal or whatever. But like, would you call yourself highly focused or the other one?
I would call myself highly focused because
Yeah.
part of it is that one of the things that some writers do, and I certainly am one of them, is there's sort of a ritual to the day. I know a guy who gets up at the same time, eats the exact same thing for breakfast, walks the same route to the office that he has outside his house at the same time every day, and that's just part of his ritual. So part of it is that I tried. One of the reasons I can't make coffee and breakfast at the same time is that I'm capable of doing it, but doing it drives everything else out of my head. So when I'm doing that, and you're not interrupting me, is I'm thinking, what's the scene I'm working on today? What haven't I figured out? How far am I going to get today? I am actively thinking about that stuff. Again, to you, it looks like I'm a drooling idiot, which is also true. But that's kind of what's going on in the mind of this particular lazy fuck.
Oh,
Well, does that extend to things like putting the new toilet paper on the roll? You're highly focused and you just can't okay. So yeah, I live with this like super highly focused man, and all I want to say is you've obviously made it work for you, and I feel like I have learned to adapt mostly, right? I'm getting better.
You are getting better.
And I just think, I don't know. I think
20
it's
more years and you'll have it down.
right. I mean, I really am proud of you, Nick. I think it's amazing what you've done. I mean, come on, 6 published novels. And if this is what it takes for you to be highly focused in this way during the day, I don't know. I'll take back all the snide comments I've made over the years, and I'll try to make more. But really, I wouldn't have it any other way.
oh, like a well-crafted ending to a book. This came around beautifully and wrapped up like a big bow on a Christmas present. So we want to thank Margaret for coming on. You were a cherished addition to the show today, and we love bringing spouses on. We may have to try this a little bit more because this was both scary and exciting and exhilarating all at the same time. Mr. Swigert, thank you for coming on today. Nick, good to see you again. Congratulations on The Breaker, your 6th Peter Ash novel coming out soon.
And we're looking forward to seeing what happens in Nebraska on your next novel when it drops.
Yeah, me too. I have no idea at this point. So
Yeah, well,
thanks everybody. It's great to see you guys again. Bill, thanks for being the guest, the guest questioner. And Margaret, I love you dearly.
Ah,
Thanks, you guys. This was really fun.
cool.
Thanks all.
Cheers to everybody here. All right, the crew would like to thank Mr. Nick Petrie and his beautiful wife, Margaret, for coming on today. And they discussed his newest novel, The Breaker, coming out this January. And join us every Monday for another wonderful guest. Let me find my mouse button. There we go. And Mr. Bill Schweigert, anything to say to our fans before we cancel you?
Cancel me.
We're canceling him.
I'm getting canceled.
Well, the metrics don't look good. I'm sorry to say.
It's fair enough. Well, it was a hell of a ride. Thanks for having me on. Anytime.
Beautiful to see you, pal. And there's mud in your eye, gentlemen. All right. This is the outro for Nick Petrie and The Breaker.
3.
And Chris isn't here, but Bill Schweigert is stealing his spotlight because he's
His
doing
name is
such a good
Schweigs.
job.
He Schweigs to you.
It's Mr. Schweigs to you.
William Jefferson Schweigert.
It sounds like a medical procedure. I'm going to do the Bill Schweigert, and then we're going to bring.
I tweet at him and I give him a new middle name every single time.
Every single time.
That's not going to
Never
work well. I have his nickname tattooed on my lower back, and it's just
William Petrie Schweigert.
It's the hyphen that gets me every time. All right, this is the outro for Nick Petrie, number 2, and his beautiful wife was on for the program, and Bill Schweigert was here, adding his usual charm and swag to the episode.
His swag. I love it.
Just don't touch it. He's a married man. In 3, 2, 1. We want to thank Mr. Nick Petrie and his beautiful wife, Margaret, to join us on the Crow today.
The crudité.
You know, we've done first takes for like the last month, so thank God I'm here to screw things up. 3, 2, 1, and game. All right. We want to thank Mr. Nick Petrie and his beautiful wife, Margaret, today on the show, talking about...
You just became a caveman. Beautiful Margaret, today, show.
So easy a caveman can do it. Take 3, game. The crew would like to thank Mr. Nick Petrie and his beautiful wife, Margaret, for coming on the show today to talk about his latest novel, not The Drifter. What was it called?
The Breaker.
The Breaker. When you don't script and you start
It's the
getting
novel,
good.
not The Drifter.
I was not incorrect about that, by the way.
Nick, set the coffee up the night before, you lazy fuck.
Yeah.
How hard is that?